Dear students, in the previous video, we had discussed some important ages, phases, or moments of Indian writing in English, such as Bhakti movement, Renaissance, mysticism, and national movement. Today, we are going to discuss, and in that video, we had discussed about the Bhakti movement. Today, we are going to discuss about Renaissance. Renaissance is a very important term. Renaissance is an age in Europe which began from uh, 14th century to the 16th century, and we know that Renaissance is characterized by scientific discoveries, inventions, a scientific outlook, rationality, enlightenment, etc. But the Renaissance came in India in later periods. The word Renaissance literally means resurgence in art, literature, science, and learning. Indian languages use the term Navjagran in awakening to describe this phase. In India, its beginnings were associated with the coming of the British and the spurring that native systems of knowledge received from the Orientalists. The Renaissance origins are traced to the cultural encounter between East and West and inflow of Western ideas. It is associated with the beginnings of modernization. So, this is a very important fact that modernization or modern period is the result of Renaissance. This period of Indian history needs some detailed attention. The British came to India on a trading mission through East India Company as early as the mid 18th century. In 1757, the Battle of Plassey fought about 150 miles away from Calcutta between the troops of Nawab Sirajuddaulah and the company decisively passed the power into the company's hands in that region. It then went on to expand its hold over other parts of the country and was later governed by an act of British Parliament passed in 1773. As the company kept on gaining economic power and built up a strong administrative structure, they also opened colleges, encouraged translations from Persian and Sanskrit, established libraries. The Asiatic Society libraries in Calcutta and Bombay were established during this period and determined the education policy. Macaulay's famous Minute of 1835 decided that English was to be the medium of instruction. The Renaissance in India is termed as the Bengal Renaissance primarily because the early location of this resurgence was Bengal. Calcutta happened to be the British capital from 1772 to 1911. Though the beginning and the ending of this period cannot be clearly defined, it can be seen as one marked by a shift in 1858 when India, after the War of 1857, which is referred to as the mutiny in colonial times, after the War of 1857 was directly placed under the British Crown. When India, after the War of 1857, was directly placed under the British Crown. So it can be marked by a shift in 1858 when India, after the War of 1857, was directly placed under the British Crown. Tentatively, it is possible to treat it as beginning in 1828 with the establishment of Brahma Samaj and tapering off in 1905 when the partition of Bengal took place. The Renaissance was also political and a social movement, with the intellectuals hotly debating political matters, nation construction, patriotism, and social reform. But regretfully, it was mainly an elitist movement with a heavy dependence on patronage. Post 1858, it moved into a more nationalist phase with a return to native value systems. Swami Vivekananda addressed the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, wherein he placed a counter-view to the existing belief in Western ideas. Though this parliament had been called to celebrate Western civilization and its achievements, Swami Vivekananda, in his address, attempted to highlight the universal principles of Hinduism, especially tolerance and spirituality. The second half of the Renaissance, that is the post 1858 period, was an encounter with the country's own past. But in some ways, the Renaissance interrupted the humanistic discourse of the Bhakti movement, which, even as it worked for equality, was interested in bridging religious differences and dismissing hierarchical structures. The Renaissance, on the other hand, was elitist, westward looking, and in its second phase, divisionary in terms of religious belief. Its demand for equality and non discriminatory practices was also curiously patriarchal. Tarudat and her family, father and uncles, Rabindranath Tagore's family, all have their literary beginnings in this period and they easily flow into the national struggle. So this is all about Renaissance. So we have learned that Renaissance is a very important phase, not only in the history of world, but in the history of India also. Renaissance is marked by modernization. Whatever modern outlook, scientific thoughts, rationality, and enlightenment uh, we have seen, they are results of this phase of history. They are results of Renaissance. Thanks for listening.